Okay, welcome to the final part of my presentation on sexual morality. Sorry that it got interrupted, but I just have one more slide that I'd like to get through. So if we could keep our notebooks out and our pens or pencils ready. We were talking about the fact that St. John Paul II, who was recently canonized, recently named a saint, who was Pope from the 1970s through the beginnings of the 2000s, had a teaching called the Theology of the Body, in which he talked about our bodies being good and sex being a good thing, and talking about what are some of the characteristics, what are some of the qualities that make it a good thing, that make it a healthy thing. And just like the example I used with food, food isn't always healthy. And so when might sex maybe not be healthy or right in particular circumstances. And he came up with four kind of defining characteristics that can help us to determine if sex is a good and healthy and moral choice. So the first characteristic he says is that in order for sex to be good and healthy and moral, it needs to be free. Okay? In order for sex to be good, sex needs to be free, which means that it's never coerced or pressured, that people freely choose to participate in it. And so they would never, sex could never be a good thing if someone's doing it because they're afraid that someone will break up with them, or someone's doing it because they're physically afraid of being hurt or physically overpowered by the person who wants to have sex with them. And sex is not good or free if money is exchanged. Um, and so, or if people are not free from worrying about, what would be the consequences. And so sex should be free both in the spiritual sense, never coerced or pressured, fully people fully consenting to both people fully consenting to participating in it, and also in the literal sense that money can never be exchanged, because the value of our bodies and the value of our sexuality is more than anybody could ever place a dollar amount on. So in order for sex to be good and healthy, it needs to be free. It also needs to be total, complete. The whole self needs to be involved. That when we give of ourselves to somebody else, when we're in a vulnerable position by being naked with somebody else, then there needs to be total commitment. That if you're just giving certain body parts, then there's not a full total giving of self. And so there's no way you could do that with somebody that you don't know and haven't committed to. And there's no way that you can do that with multiple people. That it needs to be a complete and total giving of your whole self, not just your sexual body parts, but your commitment, your spiritual self, your life to that person. And that's something that cannot be done, in a casual relationship. In order for sex to be good and healthy and true in all that it was created to be, it must also be faithful. Okay, meaning that it can't be shared among multiple people. It needs to be given to one person, and then that one person you can commit to and fully share with yourself. There's a reason why, even in more casual romantic relationships, even dating relationships, we have a concept of cheating, and that cheating is wrong. And that's because we expect a certain amount of monogamy. We expect a certain amount of being faithful to each other, and being honest with each other and not sneaking around. And so, for sex to be good and true and healthy, it needs to be faithful. It cannot be done in a cheating way. It cannot be done with multiple people. And finally, the quality of sex that makes it good and healthy is that sex is meant to be fruitful. And that's just a biological fact, that a consequence of sex is potentially new life being created, that sex makes babies. And so it's important to remember that, and that if there's an attempt to take that consequence of sex out of the equation, and sex is being engaged in just for pleasure and not with the understanding that there could be a child created, then that is not a good and healthy situation, because it's denying what sex actually is and what sex actually does, biologically speaking. And so sex needs to be open to new life. Doesn't mean that life is always going to be created with every sexual act, but it needs to be open to that and recognize that, and not take measures such as contraception or things like that in order to deny what sex actually is and what sex actually does. And so you will notice that there has been a worksheet also posted with this assignment that asks you to take a look at a couple of case studies. So you'll read the scenarios, and your job is to determine, is the sex that's described or the sexual act that's described in each of these scenarios free, total, faithful, and fruitful? And all of these things are meant to be true in order for sex to be the good and healthy thing that it was created to be by God. So if you could take a look at those case studies and work with them, and then we'll talk about them and answer any questions that you might have on Monday. All right. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe in the snow. Hopefully you're not having too much of difficulty digging out, and we will see you Monday.